Hello everyone, welcome to another one of our Odinism versus Christianity videos, where today we're going to be discussing the cause of all evil, whether it is the God of the Bible or the All-Father himself, Odin. A very common objection to the concept of God among atheists is the problem of evil. And while brighter minds than my own have addressed this issue in detail, our goal isn't to provide a solution. The topic of this study will be addressing from the sacred texts of two particular groups who precisely is to blame for everything that goes wrong in this world. We will look at two passages in the Bible and in the Eddas that could be used to level the blame towards God, and noting both in full context will hopefully clarify whether or not this accusation is justified. Because note, the claim that God is responsible for all evil could be wrong if the only verses that could be used to support it don't actually say that in the slightest. But if on the other hand they do, well, the accusation would be justified. So let's start with the Bible. The verse that's oftentimes brought up to level the blame of all evil in this world towards Yahweh, towards the God of the Bible, is found in the book of Isaiah, chapter 45 and verse 7, where we read, God speaking, I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create calamity. I, the Lord, do all these things. Now here's the context. In this particular passage in the book of Isaiah, an 8th century BC prophet is being used by the God of Israel to predict the individual who will conquer the Babylonians and to call him out as his instrument of judgment, this man who will conquer the Babylonians. To add more icing to this cake, the prophet is speaking these words in the 8th century BC, when the Assyrian Empire hasn't even been taken over by Babylon. He calls this man out by name and details for us that God is the one who will give him victory over this soon-to-be, but not yet, world-dominating empire. It's worth mentioning as well that Cyrus the Great wouldn't be born for almost another century by the time this specific prophecy was made. We start Isaiah 45 not in verse 7, but in verse 1. Thus says the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have held, to subdue nations before him, and to loose the armor of kings, to open before him the double doors, so that the gates will not be shut. I will go before you, and will make the crooked places straight. I will break in pieces the gates of bronze, and cut the bars of iron. I will give you the treasures of darkness, and hidden riches of secret places, that you may know that I, the Lord, who call you by name, am the God of Israel. For Jacob my servant's sake, and Israel my elect, I have even called you by your name. I have named you, though you have not known me. I am the Lord, and there is no other. There is no God besides me. I will gird you, though you have not known me, that they may know from the rising of the sun to its setting that there is none besides me. I am the Lord, there is no other. And now we get to verse 7. I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create calamity. I, the Lord, do all these things. Now, here we get a good descriptor of the nature of God. Not only does this very passage specify the number of gods that are out there for a reason, he's reminding a pagan king who believes in many gods who the real reason is behind his success, and proves it by calling his name and his military career in detail out before he was even born. But also know that as the only God sets the standard of what good is by nature. This was observed not just by the Jews, but even by Greek philosophers like Plato, where he noted the definition of good is monadic. It's the one standard. To say that God is the cause of all evil in a monotheistic, a one-God system, would literally be saying the definition of good is evil. It's a self-defeating statement. And if you read a passage in a way where it results in a nonsense conclusion, you're probably the one misreading it. So, what was the statement in Isaiah 45 and verse 7? Cyrus will bring calamity upon Babylon, but God will cause Cyrus to do so in judgment for Babylon's sins. So the conclusion then, the calamity that God is the cause of, isn't all evil. He is addressing the actions of a specific man who will do a specific thing for a specific reason. It is not the cause for doctrine that Yahweh is the cause of all evil, nor has a single Jewish commentator of the Tanakh concluded that from the text. All that was said conclusively was that Cyrus was going to be God's tool of judgment on Babylon. And since justice doesn't classify as evil under any standard, it is when bad things happen to bad people. So God takes credit for that through his servant Cyrus. So note that. Now going on to the edicts, we read in Helgakvitha Hundingsbana, the second poem, in verse 33, "Mad thou art, sister, and wild of mind, such a curse on thy brother to cast. Odin is ruler of every ill, who sunders kin with runes of spite." Now here's the context of this statement. According to the commentary of Caroline Larrington and her translation of the Poetic Edda, the Norse hero Helgi married the Valkyrie Sigrun, whom every player of God of War 4 hears the name of and shudders, fathered children. And after besting a man in battle named Hogni, who was Sigrun's father, his son Dag offers a sacrifice to Odin to get revenge. Odin grants his request by giving him his own spear to accomplish the task. And when Sigrun curses him for killing yet another husband she has to pick up off the battlefield, Dag explains to her that it was Odin's fault for putting runes of animosity between their families. But don't take my word for it. Let's actually read the poem. Again, Helgakvitha Hundingsbana, the second poem. We read verse 33. Let's go back to verse 28. Helgi took Sigrun to wife, and they had sons. Helgi did not reach old age. Dag, the son of Hogni, offered a sacrifice to Odin to be avenged for his father's death. Odin gave Dag his spear. Dag found Helgi, his brother-in-law, at a place which is called Fjotorland. He thrust his spear through Helgi's body, then Helgi fell, and Dag rode to Sevafjol and told Sigrun the tidings. Sad am I, sister, sorrow to tell these. Woe to my kin, pay attention to this, unwilling I worked. In the morn there fell at Fjotorland the noblest prince the world has known, and his heel he set on the heroes' necks. Sigrun said, Now may every oath thee bite that with Helgi sworn thou hast by the water bright of Lipt and the ice-cold stone of Uth. The ship shall sail not in which thou sailest, though a favoring wind shall follow after. The horse shall run not whereon thou ridest, though fain thou art thy foe to flee. Verse 31 is missing from the manuscript story this is based on, but nonetheless will continue. The sword shall bite not, which thou bearest, till thy head itself it sings about. Vengeance were mine for Helgi's murder. Wert thou a wolf in the woods without, possessing not and knowing no joy, having food save corpses to feed on. And then Dag spake after this rant, Mad thou art, sister, and wild of mind, such a curse on thy brother to cast. Odin is ruler of every evil, who sunders kin with runes of spite. Now in this we get a good descriptor of the nature of Odin. Throughout the Eddas we see that Odin is essentially a powerful man, and that he is arbitrary and not bound by a specific moral compass. He is willing to violate his own marriage vows as well as the marriage vows of others, like we read in Harbasloth and Grimnismal. He will use runes to force people into doing his will, like we read in Baldur's Dramar and Voluspo. And, note this as well, no text in the Eddas would conflict with Dag's claim about Odin's character. If anything, it would affirm it. Odin had no reason to view Sigrun's marriage to Helgi in any high regard. Odin had used runes to compel people into doing things against their will before, and Odin had no obligation to set any particular moral standard, note this, by nature, since he's merely one God among many. So the statement then, in verse 33, would read as follows. the conflict between your husband and I was Odin's fault, not mine. He caused the conflict between us. I just ended it. So in conclusion, from what we know about Odin's character and nature, Helgi's death was caused, enabled, and instigated by Odin's direct involvement through giving Dag his own spear, setting runes of conflict between their families, and giving us precedent towards Odin's nature, to conclude that if anything goes wrong in our lives, Odin could have been the inspiration for it all. This was the only comfort that was given to Sigrun. It was God's fault giving me the weapon and causing the conflict in the first place. I mean, forget my efforts in the premeditated murder outside the battlefield. As Flip Wilson would say in the Ed Sullivan Show, Odin made me do it. So the final conclusion. The only passage in the Bible that would suggest God is responsible for evil is spoken in the context of judgment towards Babylon in the context of war. The main passage in the Eddas that suggests Odin is responsible for evil is spoken in the context of a demonstrable fact that he used runes and his own armory to enable a man to commit premeditative murder outside the battlefield for what he did on the battlefield. Now, which would you rather follow? A just God who knows the future, or a God that enables people to commit murder and sets runes on them that leaves them no choice but to act on it? If you're looking for a religion based on morality, I can't recommend Odinism. If you're looking for a God worth worshiping, I recommend Jesus Christ. Thank you all for your time. I look forward to discussing this more with you in the future. The comment section is open for a reason. Make sure that if you want clarification or examples as presented in this study, to let me know, but understand why we're doing this. If we're going to make any comparison between two religions, we need to do so in full context and not just nitpick verses and say, see, this proves it. Because while those passages may prove something about Odin, we can't say the same for the God of the Bible, which is why I continue to recommend him